What do you think is the most overpowered or lethal skill move in football history? Certainly, one of the earliest and most iconic on a global scale is that of the Cruyff turn. Johan Cruyff is one of football's greatest innovators, and he redefined what it meant to play with flair and intelligence. Back then, the move was revolutionary, using that clever change of direction to gap defenders and progress up the pitch. Then, if you fast forward, there's Zinedine Zidane's roulette. Whenever he pulled it off to escape tight marking, it's almost like his defenders had no idea where he went. Because although he wasn't the most athletic or agile player, he was the embodiment of grace under pressure. His touch and technique was enough for him to give the roulette notoriety, even amongst a footballing landscape full of world-class talent. But of course, you can't forget Ronaldo's step-overs. Easily one of the most iconic moves in history. But while there are many to use it, nobody perfected it more lethally than him. Ronaldo would glide towards defenders with his signature step-overs, baiting them to take the challenge only to leave them flat-footed or sat on the pitch. His ability to burst past even the most experienced defenders in the most defensively elite era in football history is all the evidence you need of its effectiveness and lethality. But what about Ronaldinho and his famous Elastico? On the ball, we already knew he was an absolute magician. But the way that he smoothly and effortlessly snapped the ball from one side to another in just a fraction of a second looked nothing short of an illusion. His Elastico would completely catch defenders off guard and leave them stumbling. Whenever they tried to defend it, they would commit to one side, only to see the ball being whipped away in the opposite direction before they could even react. Then of course, you have Cristiano Ronaldo and the Ronaldo chop. CR7 used this move countless times to attack and cut in, quickly changing directions mid-sprint, catching defenders off guard, and creating enough space to send a thunderous shot towards goal. It didn't matter if it was outside the box, inside the box, or even if it was off his right or left foot. Whenever he did that move, more likely than not, you knew a goal was coming next. Lastly, there was a move with a 99% success rate, a move that was so unstoppable that it led defenders to question reality itself. No other than the Antony spin. Okay, just kidding. But in all seriousness, there was one other that was so genuinely overpowered that it got to the point that it was physically impossible to stop without fouling. A move that had become so unfair that FIFA would eventually decide to ban it completely. It was known as no other than the seal dribble. Its invention is kind of up to debate, but without a doubt, the move was mastered and employed best by no other than a relatively obscure Brazilian Wonderkid from the mid-2000s named Kerlon Souza. I know, over the years, it's kind of become a meme whenever a Brazilian Wonderkid earns the nickname of the next Pelé. And to a lesser degree, there have been some others who earned the nickname of the next Ronaldo. But back then, Kerlon Souza was genuinely considered by some as the next Ronaldinho. Look at some of these titles here. But despite being as infamous as he was back then, throughout the years, he's been overall forgotten. So today, we're looking at the story of Kerlon Souza. Kerlon was infamous before he ever stepped onto a first-team pitch. He would already make waves for the youth level and for Brazil's U17s. Because since his early teens, in a country where fancy dribbling and footwork was the norm, Kerlon used his forehead. He would flick the ball up and it would bounce alongside him as he ran, leaving defenders completely confused. You have to remember, this was the mid-2000s. Things didn't go viral nearly as quickly as they do today. But still, news of Kerlon and his seal dribble would spread very quickly. Videos of him performing the move quickly spread online, going viral and gaining millions of views. And at least in Brazil, he had become so infamous, they had started to call him O Faquinha, or the Little Seal in English. But don't be mistaken, Kerlon's iconic move didn't just come out of nowhere. His mastery over the seal dribble was the product of years of practice. As Kerlon recalls, when I was a very young kid, I would train a lot with my dad. One day, he kicked the ball up high for me and it bounced on the floor and came up to my head. I did 4 or 5 little hitters in a row, keeping the ball to my head. Then my dad stopped and asked, if you ran with the ball on top of your head like that, would it be a free kick? I said, I don't know, but we should find out. From that moment forward, Kerlon started to work on the seal dribble every day. It started simple, keeping the ball up while standing still for as long as he can. But soon it evolved into walking, running, and eventually dribbling around cones, even going a step beyond that and incorporating peripheral vision training so that Kerlon could spot defenders and navigate throughout the pitch even with the ball bouncing on top of his head. And by the time Kerlon was 13, he was ready to test it in a real match. While playing for Cruzeiro's youth academy, Kerlon would finally debut this unique skill. And he would run from the midfield all the way to the penalty box, with the ball perfectly balanced on his head before bringing it down and scoring a goal. And ever since that match, it was confirmed the seal dribble could legitimately work. The opposition defenders had no idea what they were looking at, and even more, they had no idea how to stop it. However, despite Kerlon's true mastery of the skill, he isn't exactly the one who invented it. From my research, I found that before Kerlon went extremely viral for his seal dribble, there was another player who kind of used the same tactic, and he was an Italian footballer named Marco Nappi. And most famously, he would produce an early version of this seal dribble during no other than the semi-final of the 1990 UEFA Cup, running from just outside the box halfway through the pitch, bouncing the ball on top of his head and keeping it safe from defenders. Marco Nappi, however, wouldn't nearly abuse this move as much as Kerlon would. But the seal dribble wasn't the only thing that Kerlon was known for. After all, people were calling him the next Ronaldinho, and he really did have a lot of potential. At the Copa America Under-17s held at Venezuela, Kerlon was Brazil's top goal scorer, and he would stand out even amongst other Wonderkids like Anderson and Marcelo. In his younger days, he was a sharp passer, a strong finisher, and a proficient free kick taker. But of course, what he was known for best was that seal dribble. Heck, even in the Under-17 Copa Americas, he would pull off the move against countries like Uruguay, which this popular picture and the thumbnail I made is based on. However, as Kerlon approached first team play, the seal dribble, as popular as it was, would do his career more harm than good. Kerlon would use the seal dribble in a local derby, which resulted in a massive brawl, as the move would slowly be seen as a taunt or provocation towards the opposition. Of course, in Brazil, skill moves and showboating had always been a source of tension, but the seal dribble to many, especially the opposition, was seen more as a mockery and insult. At the youth level, sure, Kerlon was tripped and kicked, but as he started doing it against grown men, the challenges turned more violent and very physical. Heck, you could even say that these grown men were straight assaulting the teenager. And the worst came in September of 2007. As Cruzeiro was leading Atlético Mineiro 4-3 with 10 minutes left on the clock, where Kerlon would suddenly decide to pull off his seal dribble. And after a few touches is when Atlético Mineiro fullback Coelho would completely shoulder charge Kerlon, snapping his head back and sending him to the floor. Both teams would rush in and a huge brawl would follow. And after much debate with the Atlético Mineiro fullback even receiving a 120-day ban, people would pull off the classic victim blaming. People would blame Kerlon for showboating and inviting malice. Even the captain of another Brazilian club, Fluminense, Luiz Alberto, would say, "It's disrespectful to his opponents. They're professionals too. He wouldn't get past me. I would use Copa-era moves if I had to. I would take the ball, take his head, and everything else." Yeah, real manly threatening a teenager like that. And in his defense, Kerlon would handle it much more maturely. He said, "Fans go to the stadium to see a spectacle. We need to decide what the main idea of Brazilian football is, art or violence." As you can imagine, opinions on the seal dribble were very mixed. Some saw it as taunting, some saw it as unnecessary, and some saw it as a legitimate tactic. In fact, one of Kerlon's managers even encouraged him to use the seal dribble right after kickoff. But as expected, it didn't go well, because after mere moments, the opposition would come charging in and start kicking him ferociously, genuinely trying to injure his legs. And they would succeed, as during his late teens and early 20s, Kerlon would already have multiple ACL injuries and surgeries. Genuinely irresponsible for the manager to continuously advise a teenager to do that. It might not be fair that the opposition would attack Kerlon like that any chance they got, but his manager should have put an end to it a long time ago. Kerlon's early hype of being the next Ronaldinho sent him from Brazil to Italy, signing for Inter Milan. And according to Kerlon, there was a time in preseason playing under Jose Mourinho where he actually tried to use the seal dribble. But when he did, teammate Marco Materazzi, the same guy that Zidane would infamously headbutt, would, in Kerlon's words, hit me and I would fly away. But But despite the high expectations, Kerlon's career would never really pan out. He would be loaned out to clubs like Ajax before moving back to Brazil, and even moving around to play in different countries like Japan, the US, and Slovakia. Many people might look back at Kerlon now and think that he was just a one-trick pony. But the truth is, his body simply didn't allow him to reach his full potential. All those injuries that he received as a teenager in Brazil for retaliation against his seal dribble, and opposition players overall not liking him, would eventually snowball, as Kerlon would suffer 6 ACL injuries and a handful of ankle injuries, about half of which occurred when he was still a teenager. In Kerlon's words, "I gradually lost love for football. After every surgery, I took 6 or even 7 months to fully recover. When I came back, it was hard to keep up physically. Maybe it wasn't that I didn't love football, it was just that I didn't want to be in pain anymore, so that's why I stopped." Now, the rules of football have been changed in order to protect the safety of any player and deter them from doing the seal dribble. Referees are now allowed to punish players for unsporting behavior if they ever use the seal dribble again, citing a lack of respect and earning the opposition a free kick. Because sure, let's punish the guy doing the seal dribble, not the guy that's actually on the pitch assaulting another player. No, that would be crazy. But at the same time, I do get it. Excessive showboating is widely seen as a sign of disrespect. And more often than not, when a player does so, it's usually deliberately done, with the intention of being disrespectful. But watching Kerlon seal dribble, that definitely wasn't the case. Kerlon was a Wonderkid that was ahead of his time, if not for the seal dribble and several horrific ACL injuries early in his career, which were a result of the retaliation towards his skill. He might very well have gone on to have a very successful and long career. But whatever happened, happened, and at the very least, Kerlon will be immortalized in memory as the Wonderkid with a skill so unique, he forced football to change its rules.